let's all welcome Mr. Bill Reynolds, and he's going to come up. He's our city's veterans advocate, and he's going to come up and talk to us about the memorial that he's been working on diligently over the past 2 years or year? 2 years? 2 years. And now he's got the thing going.
Greetings. Hey, thanks, Alan, for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here again. It's been a while. I didn't bring any prepared remarks. All this stuff is on my mind constantly. I want to start talking about the signal and the veterans page before I get into the monument. It was about a year and a half ago where I was sitting in my office at home minding my own business, and some of my friends at the Signal gave me a call and said, hey, would you mind coming over and speaking with one of our new owners of the Signal newspaper, Mr. Chuck Champion? And I said, I'd be delighted to. So I came over, spent about an hour and a half in Chuck's office, door closed. He gave me full attention about what's going on, what I saw going on in the city, what I thought about the veteran activities in town. And as we spoke, and by the way, people were knocking on the door and opening it and said, Chuck, you got a meeting to go to. And he'd say, handle it. I'm talking to Reynolds, which impressed the heck out of me, Chuck. And we got along really well. He told me his aspirations for the paper. I had a good sense of where he stood in his strong support for veterans and the military community here in Santa Clarita and in America. And I told him quite candidly, I said, we stopped taking the Signal a few years ago. It just didn't seem like it was worth it anymore. And but I said, after hearing what you have to say, before I leave the building, I'm going to subscribe. And I did. And he appreciated that. So the next day, once again, minding my own business, I get a phone call from Chuck. He says, hey, Bill, man, we got along really good yesterday. And he says, we're looking for a director of Veterans Affairs to join the Signal. And we think you're the guy. And I kind of stuttered, and I go, but Chuck, I don't want a job. I don't really want any responsibilities. And he laughed it off, and he says, no. He says, listen, this is not that kind of a job. He says, we'll have an office for you. You just come and go at will. There's no hours. And we just want you to tell us what you know that's going on in the veterans community, because we want to report on it. And there's no pay. And I said, and I thought, you know what? That's the kind of job that I want, because I don't want to make money off of the veterans community. And plus, I figured, seriously, I will come and go at will. So I showed up, and gosh, they treated me like a rock star there. I had the photographer taking 1 million photographs of me. I was interviewed with Chuck. There was a nice article in the newspaper. And it really felt great. I mean, I felt like a rock star there for that day. And I have a lot of friends at the Signal. So about 2 weeks later, Jason Schaff come into my office, and he says, hey, Bill, you can write, right? I go, well, I've written. And he says, what do you think about interviewing our local veterans? And we'll have a veterans page every Friday. You interview them, get their stories, get some photos, and we'll have a veterans page every Friday. And I said, you know something? I'll give that a go. I like that idea. And what I want to do is start with veterans in the community who served in my combat unit in Vietnam. And there's a number of them here in town. And I wanted to I knew their story pretty much, and I knew that would be a way for me to get moving on the direction I wanted to go and how I wanted to cover it. But the one thing going in is that I knew that I would interview veterans in town, in our community, and to honor them. That's my principal thing, is to honor their service. They don't have to be a combat veteran. They just have to serve their country. And so the Signal started putting little blocks on the veterans page. Hey, if you're a veteran, contact Bill Reynolds, provide him your name, your branch of service, years served. And what we did starting last year was every veteran that we know of in town will have their name in the paper on Veterans Day. Last year we had well over 900 names. I don't know how many we're going to have this next Veterans Day, but we're still collecting them. And it says send your information via email to me. And so boom, I'm starting to get emails like gangbusters. And then that led, of course, to interviewing more veterans. And you know, the difficult thing that occurred to me is that we have so many veterans, and I can't interview them all. I mean, I slowly but surely I get to them, and it comes down. It's one of the things I struggle with is who's next, and it comes down to a matter of convenience. When I'm ready to interview, because I'm so busy with this monument and a bunch of other stuff, if I call a veteran or send him an email, if he doesn't respond that quick, I go to the next person, and I have to have somebody every week. So it's been really outstanding. And Alan, would you mind showing on the screen a couple of those veteran pages that I sent to you? And maybe make it a little bit bigger. That didn't happen? Okay, well, this fellow, people come to me, people around town, it's word of mouth thing. A guy I used to work with at Lockheed many years ago sent me an email, and he says, "Hey, Bill, you want to interview Bernie?" He was a Thud pilot, bomber pilot. And I said, "Yeah, it sounds great, you know." And so I met up with this guy, and I can't tell you how delightful he was. Incredible career he had in the U.S. Air Force. But that's how these come to me. And Robin Clow over at the Senior Center has put me in touch with a number of people. And this guy is telling, "Hey, there's another guy you want to interview." And I got a lot of guys to interview, and not just guys, but women who served our country. I interviewed a husband and wife team. Same interview. But it's put up the next one, if you don't mind. Calvin Erickson, bomber pilot in World War II. He's got fantastic photos of his bombing missions. Another fellow that I interviewed in one of our senior centers was in the Army. He was in Patton's 3rd Army in the medical deal, in the medical part of that, and they would move their hospital tents behind the lines as Patton moved forward. And he was there when they opened up Dachau. And I tell you, his photo album was, hey man, it shook you up looking at the photos he had of that concentration camp. I interviewed another veteran who was actually born in a concentration camp. It's really amazing. The veterans, people who live next door to you and down the street, you have no idea what they did in their service for this country. So it's an amazing thing. And the other thing that I've learned is that we have so many veterans in town who have so much memorabilia. And it struck me, and I've had people tell me, "Hey, Bill, you know what? We need to have a military museum in town, or a war museum, if you will." Veterans around town have tons of memorabilia, and you know what happens over time? It just goes away. So that might be another project I'll get on one of these days. I don't know if I'm a glutton for punishment or not, but and so anyway, that kind of brings me to our Fallen Warriors Monument. The Fallen Warriors Monument, actually, the idea of having fallen soldiers' names engraved in stone came to me maybe 6 years ago, when one day I thought, I wonder how many, being a Vietnam veteran, a combat veteran, and lost a lot of guys, my buddies, I wonder how many from Santa Clarita Valley we lost. And I did a quick search on virtualwall.org, which breaks down all of the KIAs that you see on the Vietnam Memorial Wall, breaks it down by city and state. And so I went to California, and I find out that out of Saugus and Newhall, we lost 14 men. And I was astounded. We lost 14 right here in Santa Clarita Valley. So I went to City Council, and I made a proposal that, why don't you put up a pedestal and have their names engraved. I read their names, date of death, and their age. And I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in that chamber. And they appreciated hearing from me on that. But they didn't make a decision that night. It's something they had to think about. And then I got a letter from the city saying, well, we think we're going to put bricks down instead of doing this granite pedestal. All right. What am I going to do? You can't fight City Hall, right? So, right, Cam? And later on, I was at the Elks Lodge, and some of us guys were talking about the fallen warriors from Santa Clarita Valley, and Ted Olson, I forget his title at the time. He was the #1 guy over at the Elks. He says, "Hey, Bill, I wonder how many we lost in World War II." And I said, "Geez, I don't really know. I don't even know where to start to look for that." And another guy says, "Well, I bet the Signal Archives has it." This is going back 2 or 3 years now. And I said, well, I know a few people there. I'll go over and see what I can do. So I went, and Lila, Little John, and Jason, they said, yeah, come on in and check it out. And Lila says to me, you know, Bill, we don't let just anybody into our archives. These papers go back to 1919, and they're very brittle. And I said, I'll be gentle, but I only need to go through World War II and the Korean War. So they set me up in the conference room, gave me the big old folders. These are original papers. And I went through them page by page. And I found 20 articles on SCV fallen warriors from World War II. I found 5 from the Korean War. And Lila says to me afterwards, well, now that you have this information, well, what are you going to do with it? And I said, our city needs a monument to honor these great Americans. They have to have their names engraved in stone. They should never be forgotten. And she turned to reporter Jim Holt and says, Jim, talk to Reynolds. Let's get an article in the paper in the morning. And we did, and it appeared in the paper the next morning. And that's kind of a significant thing, and I'll explain in a little bit how important that article was. So finally I went to the city and said, hey, I've got almost 50 names here. Let's have a monument. And then I was directed to go to the Veterans Memorial Committee for approval, because apparently there's a policy that says any changes at the plaza, you got to have that body approve it. And I was astounded, because this is city property. And they said, we have a policy, and that's just the way we operate. So I said, okay. It just so happens I'm on that committee, and we have a meeting tonight, and so I'm going to address it tonight. And so I did, and I think we had 13 members at that time, and everybody agreed we ought to have it. I had a letter ready to go for our then president, Dwayne Hardy, to sign. He signed it. I took it back to City Hall the very next morning. I said, here you go. Let me know if I can help you further. 6 weeks later, after hearing nothing, I called up, and I talked to a person, I'll leave nameless now, and said, listen, what's going on with our monument? I've been grousing at home, and my wife is saying, be patient, the city's got a lot to do. And I'm going, man, I'm going to kill something. and so when I do call and talk to this person, the lady says, oh, geez, Bill, that fell right off my radar. Sorry. Let me check it out. I'll be in touch. I'll send you an email. So she sent me an email and said that the Parks Commissioner said that we need to have a plan. We need to know how much it's going to cost, who's going to fund it, and who's going to handle maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. And that's when I realized that the city's not going to make this happen. And so me being an old facilities manager guy out of Lockheed, who's had tons of alteration projects, and I've built homes, and I thought, you know what? This is going to happen. And so I contacted a granite provider who supports Eternal Valley. He gave me a contact. I had a proposal in works. And out of the clear blue, this lady named Heather Goodsell, who's back in the Northeast in granite country, sent an email to Bob Keller. She had seen that Jim Holt article months earlier. Somehow she found that, contacted Keller, said, hey, we're in the business, how can we help you? Keller handed off the email to me. I made contact with Heather, and we developed a good relationship ever since. And this has been going on for now, I don't know, a couple of years, it seems. They provided me a really nice proposal. Even sent, I showed to you the last time I was here, those granite samples that just showed how awesome this thing is going to be. And then I had a hard time getting an audience with the director of Parks and Recs. And so I thought, well, since I'm having a tough time getting in front of him with this proposal, I'm going to go around the community and see, get some moral support. Everybody I talked to said, geez, Bill, this is a no-brainer. And Don Fleming said, you mean they got bricks where people walk for these men who gave their lives? I said, that's true. So I ended up with over 200 people on my list of who supported the project. And then I was directed to, when I finally got a meeting with at City Hall, then I was they begrudgingly said, okay, we'll go to the Parks Commissioners. And the Parks Commissioners, are assigned by the City Council members. They pretty much do the bidding. It's just an extra layer of bureaucracy. I already thought that was being used with the Veterans Committee as an extra layer of bureaucracy. Now you had this other planning commission. So they didn't know what to do with it. I had 20 people in the rooms talking about how great this idea is, and they kicked it to City Council, and it was approved. Tim Ben Boydson made the motion. He seconded the motion to approve the monument. Bob Keller looked at Dante Acosta, and Dante Acosta seconded it. And then they called for a vote, and it was approved. And so I give credit to who I call the three amigos, Boydson, Keller, and Acosta, because I could not get with the two lady council members to give me time to review the proposal with them. They didn't want to consider it. And the reasoning was that this monument does not fit the design criteria established at the plaza. And I said, look, we're talking about almost 50 men who gave their lives for this country. The community could care less about design criteria. And so it was approved, and they said, you got to have community funding. And I knew I needed $50,000, and you have to have all of the names vetted by Steve Knight's office in D.C. I said, okay. 71 days later, I had $50,000. Steve Knight's staff people went through all of the list, and they found two out of my list of 49 who should not be on the monument. One fellow was a fighter pilot who was shot down in Germany and was a POW and was released after the war. Died 10 years later in an airplane crash, found out. And then the other guy, a Navy guy, Bill Osborne, they couldn't find anything on him. So we struck those two. You show the other photos. There's this monument is almost finished. That's the base. And there's going to be a top panel setting on it. And flip over to the other one, Alan, if you don't mind. That's the back side of the monument. It's finished, ready to be installed with the base. The images there, laser etched, represent World War I to present. And the front side is right now being finished. I'm expecting this to be shipped next week, and we'll have it in Charlie Rasmussen's facilities, I'm hoping by the end of next week. This monument, it really hit home to me recently how much this means to people in town. Because I'm so busy with veteran stuff, and my wife gets kind of impatient with me. I'm not taking care of honeydews, and she gets a little upset with me sometimes. But the good news is that she's learned how to repair toilets and do all kinds of maintenance stuff. So she's an angel, but she made plans for us to go to Lake Tahoe on September the 11th and spend the week there, the very day that they were breaking ground at the Veterans Plaza, which tore me up to not be present when that was happening. But nevertheless, make my wife happy. I went to Lake Tahoe and had a great time. But while there, last Thursday, I got a phone call from a young woman in Canyon Country. Her name was Jennifer Alvarado. And she says, Mr. Reynolds, I'm just calling to find out if I understand there's a Fallen Warriors monument being installed here in Santa Clarita, and just wanted to know if my uncle's name is going to be on the monument. I said, oh, what's his name? And I didn't have a list of the veterans, not veterans, but the deceased who would be on the wall. And she says, my uncle's name was Henry Acuna. And he was killed in the Korean War on July 31st, 1950. I said, oh my God, I know I don't have that name. I said, do you have any documentation? And she says, I do. And I said, could you email it to me? So after I got home, like the next day, boom, I get an email from her with some information. And I called her up and spoke to her. And I said, this is all I need. Your uncle's name is going to be on this monument. And she went on then in the conversation. She says, and by the way, my dad was an Army veteran, and he didn't serve in the Vietnam War, but he served his country. And I says, all right, I'm going to come and see you guys on Monday, okay? And I want to see she told me that they're going up to Bakersfield to see two aunts, sisters of Henry, who was killed in Korea, and we're going up there on Sunday. And so when they finished with the aunts, they had copies of pictures of his Purple Heart, which one of the sisters had, photos of Henry. They had a bunch of memorabilia. And she called me up before she got back on the freeway. She's there with her dad. And she was so excited that she got to have on her hands Henry's Purple Heart and photos and stuff. She was so excited. She called me to tell me. And she has since communicated with me. The whole family are beside themselves with joy that Uncle Henry's name, Uncle Henry, is going to be never forgotten. She's talking to other family members in other states. They're all overjoyed with this. I took the time to interview her dad, and including in his article is the story about Henry. And I hope all of you will take time to look at the Veterans page. That story will be out a week from Friday. But what a story it is. It's amazing. And I've been in touch with other Gold Star families in town, and the community is so behind this. And I just figure what an honor it is for me for two things: to do what I do with the Signal, the Veterans page, and to push this monument through. And if it wasn't for people like you guys who have donated and supported it, I don't know if it would have happened or not, but I know that it means a lot to veterans and to the Gold Star families. Am I out of time? Okay. Yeah, I think I pretty much have told the story. So, anyway. Thank you. Thank you.
Can we ask a question?
Questions?
Is there any accommodation for new names to be added as young people that are serving now might be deceased?
I'm glad you asked that question, because the answer is yes. In the case of this Henry, Uncle Henry, there was space below. We have it. You took it down, but there's all of the names. You'll have a World War II section, and Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghan. And with Uncle Henry, we had space below the Korean War heading, so we're adding him. There is space under each of those columns. There was kind of an interesting thing also happened in the last week or so. Not interesting, tragic. On the list of the Iraq-Afghan fallen warriors is one Stephen Colley, who served in Iraq in the combat zone, who came home and 6 months later committed suicide. Now, this is going back to 2007. The city has included his name on the Fallen Warriors plaque over on the bridge. The Rotary Club has included him on their display at their little memorial over at the Sports Center. And so it comes down to, well, he's been honored by the city and the Rotary. We should put him on this. And, the attitude kind of was, it's better to be inclusive. So, and also there was a fellow in World War II, a Marine who fought at Guadalcanal, who came home and killed himself. So we thought, if we're going to have Stephen Cawley, we're going to have this man. Well, just in actually on September 7th, Stephen Cawley's older brother, who is a major, who served 20 years in the Army, served in the combat zone, took his life. Now, can you imagine how the Cawley family feels? Devastated. So I got a hold of the granite people, and it's just in time. They're doing the laser etching and the engraving of the names, and Major Alan E. Cawley will be on that monument. So thanks for asking that and reminding me. Any other questions? All right, guys. Thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it.